The snow drinks blood differently in winter. It doesn't melt, it crystallizes, freezes the screams inside. Moscow, 1762. Another servant girl stumbles through the estate gates, frostbitten fingers clutching torn fabric, eyes hollow as graves. She collapses before she can speak her mistress's name, but everyone knows. Behind those golden windows lives a woman who prays with bishops, donates to orphanages, and kisses holy relics with lips that whisper torture instructions. Darya Saltykova, countess, widow, saint to the church, demon to the 108 souls she butchered. You think you know evil? You think monsters hide in shadows? This one lived in a palace, wore silk, smiled at dinner parties, and when two broken peasants finally whispered her name to an empress, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Picture Imperial Russia, 1750s. A world where human beings are bought, sold, and owned like cattle, where landowners hold absolute power over their serfs, power to punish, to discipline, to kill. Now imagine a woman who doesn't just abuse that power, she craves it. Darya Saltykova wasn't born a monster. She was a nobleman's daughter, educated in French, fluent in prayer, married to wealth and status. When her husband died young, she inherited everything: vast estates, immense wealth, and 600 human souls legally bound to her will. At first, discipline was traditional, harsh but survivable. But something festered in that widow's heart, something that turned punishment into pleasure, correction into carnage. The question isn't how she became a killer, it's how she stayed hidden for so long. 18th century Russia breathes hierarchy like oxygen. At the bottom, serfs, peasants bound to land, property, and human form. At the top, nobles like Darya Saltykova, born into a world where absolute power isn't corruption, it's birthright. Young Darya Nikolaevna grows up in this ecosystem of control: noble blood, religious education, tutored in languages and piano. She learns to curtsy to priests, donate to the poor, and smile with practiced grace. Marriage comes early to Gleb Saltykov, a minor noble with major holdings. She's 26 when he dies, leaving her everything: 600 serfs, thousands of acres, unlimited authority, and something else, something darker. The first beating happens 3 months after the funeral. A kitchen maid spills soup, simple accident. But Darya doesn't see clumsiness, she sees disrespect. The rod comes down harder than necessary, longer than tradition demands. The maid limps for weeks, but Darya sleeps better that night than she has since her husband's death. The estate sits like a miniature kingdom 30 miles from Moscow. Upstairs, gilded rooms, imported furniture, religious icons watching from every wall. Downstairs, servant quarters that slowly transform into something else. Chains appear, iron tools, rooms that servants learn to avoid after sunset. Winter makes everything worse. In the Russian cold, punishment becomes execution. A serf tied outside for an hour in summer becomes a corpse by dawn in December. But Darya doesn't see corpses. She sees problems solved, lessons taught, order restored. The killing starts small: a young woman who talks back, another who tries to escape. Each death is justified, documented, explained: heart failure, accident, suicide from despair. Local officials nod and file the reports. The church still welcomes her donations, but the serfs begin to whisper a different name: Saltychikha, the cursed version. The name spoken only in darkness, only behind closed doors, because they've seen what happens in the basement. They've heard the screams that echo until dawn, then suddenly stop. They've watched young women disappear, and new graves appear in the estate's far corners, unmarked and unmourned. Darya develops preferences: young women, pretty ones, anyone who shows defiance, intelligence, or simply catches her attention on the wrong day. The punishments grow elaborate, creative. She starts timing them, studying reactions, perfecting techniques. This isn't rage, this is artistry. Each winter brings more deaths. Each spring brings fresh serfs from distant villages, unaware of their mistress's reputation. The cycle continues, the silence deepens. Church officials visit regularly, praising her piety. Moscow nobles invite her to dinner parties, where she speaks eloquently about charity and duty. She's becoming a model of aristocratic virtue. Meanwhile, in her basement, instruments of torture hang from stone walls like religious artifacts. The contradiction should be impossible, but this is Imperial Russia, where appearance matters more than truth, where power insulates better than winter coats, until someone decides truth matters more than survival. By 1760, Darya Saltykova's estate operates like a carefully orchestrated nightmare. She's perfected the art of inflicting maximum suffering while maintaining perfect deniability. Her favorite tools reveal a methodical madness: boiling water for precision burns, red-hot tongs for strategic mutilation, frozen posts for slow hypothermia. Winter becomes her accomplice. Russian cold doesn't just kill, it preserves evidence while erasing witnesses. A serf stripped and chained outside in January doesn't struggle long. The screams stop within an hour. The body freezes solid, preserving torture marks until spring burial. But Darya's true genius lies in victim selection. She targets women almost exclusively, particularly young wives and mothers. Some whisper it stems from betrayal, perhaps an affair during her marriage, or rejection after widowhood. Others believe it's simpler: women scream louder, break faster, provide better entertainment. The pattern becomes ritualistic. A servant commits some minor infraction: burning bread, arriving late, showing insufficient deference. Instead of standard punishment, Darya summons the woman to the basement after dinner. What happens next follows a precise choreography of pain. First, psychological torment, hours of verbal abuse, threats against family members, forced confessions to imagined crimes. Then physical escalation, beating with specialized implements, burning with heated metals, mutilation of specific body parts. Finally, the killing blow, delivered only after maximum suffering has been extracted. One man, Martinov, watches 3 wives die this way: the first for allegedly flirting with a visiting merchant, the second for crying too loudly during her predecessor's funeral, the third simply for existing as a reminder of the first 2. Each execution follows the same pattern: accusation, torture, death, shallow burial. Local officials receive reports but refuse investigation. Darya's wealth insulates her like armor. Bribes flow to magistrates, priests, anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. The Orthodox Church continues accepting her donations, praising her devotion, even as congregation members whisper about cursed ground and restless spirits. The estate develops its own ecosystem of terror. Serfs learn unspoken rules: avoid eye contact, speak only when questioned, never show emotion during public punishments. They develop signals, ways to warn each other when the mistress is hunting. When basement's doors creak open after midnight, some try to escape, few succeed. Those caught face extended torture sessions that serve as lessons for others. Darya makes examples of runners, ensuring their deaths are visible, audible, unforgettable. But silence has limits. Even in Imperial Russia, where serf lives matter less than livestock, 138 suspicious deaths create ripples. Neighboring estates notice missing workers. Village priests observe empty pews. Traveling merchants report ghost stories that sound too specific, too detailed. The Moscow gossip network, that informal intelligence system of servants, traders and minor officials, begins connecting fragments. A countess who goes through serfs like firewood. An estate where young women enter but don't leave. A widow whose piety somehow coincides with unprecedented mortality rates. Still, gossip isn't evidence. Whispers aren't testimony. Power structures protect their own, until 2 men lose everything and decide they have nothing left to fear. Savely Martinov and Ermolay Ilyin, peasants whose wives died under Darya's roof, who watched children starve after mothers disappeared, who finally understand that silence equals complicity. They make a decision that will echo through Russian legal history. If local officials won't listen, they'll bypass them entirely. They'll walk to St. Petersburg. They'll petition the Empress herself. They'll risk execution for the chance to speak one word: justice. St. Petersburg, winter 1762. 2 peasants stand outside the Winter Palace, frost coating their beards, clutching a document that could cost them their lives. Savely Martinov and Ermolay Ilyin have walked hundreds of miles to deliver a petition directly to Catherine the Great, bypassing every legal protocol, social hierarchy and death threat along the way. The petition itself is a masterpiece of desperate eloquence. Written by a village scribe, it details specific murders, names victims, describes torture methods with clinical precision. But more importantly, it makes an argument that resonates with Catherine's reformist ambitions. How can Russia claim enlightenment while noble women butcher peasants for entertainment? Catherine receives thousands of petitions monthly. Most get filed and forgotten, but this one arrives at a perfect political moment. Catherine, newly crowned after overthrowing her husband Peter III, desperately needs legitimacy. She's proclaimed herself an enlightened ruler, corresponding with Voltaire, promising legal reforms. A case involving aristocratic abuse of serfs offers the perfect opportunity to demonstrate progressive leadership. More importantly, it offers a chance to remind the nobility exactly who holds ultimate power. Catherine orders a full investigation, unprecedented for crimes against serfs. She assigns Prince Alexander Vyazemsky, her most trusted legal advisor, to oversee proceedings. The message is clear: this case matters. This woman will face justice. But investigating Darya Saltykova proves nearly impossible. Witnesses have been terrified into silence for years. Physical evidence has been carefully destroyed or buried. Local officials have been compromised through bribes or threats. The church has actively protected her reputation. Vyazemsky employs revolutionary tactics. Instead of relying on local testimony, he imports investigators from distant provinces. Instead of questioning witnesses publicly, he conducts secret interviews in secure locations. Instead of accepting official death records, he orders grave excavations. Slowly, systematically, the truth emerges. Exhumed bodies reveal torture marks inconsistent with recorded causes of death. Heart attack victims show evidence of burning. Suicide cases display signs of prolonged beating. Accident reports describe injuries that couldn't possibly result from falls or farm mishaps. Surviving serfs, promised imperial protection, begin sharing stories they've hidden for years. A kitchen maid describes watching teenage girls dragged screaming to basement rooms. A stable hand recalls digging graves for bodies bearing marks he didn't recognize. An estate manager admits falsifying death certificates on direct orders from the Countess. The investigation uncovers a sophisticated system of concealment. Death records were systematically altered. Witnesses were relocated or eliminated. Physical evidence was destroyed immediately after each killing. Local priests were bribed to perform quick burials without examination. But Darya's greatest protection comes from social assumption. Who would believe a noblewoman capable of such systematic cruelty? Who would investigate complaints against a woman who donated heavily to churches, hosted charity events, maintained perfect social graces? As evidence mounts, Moscow's aristocratic community grows nervous. If Darya can be prosecuted, what protection do they have? If serf lives suddenly matter, how many other nobles might face similar scrutiny? The case becomes a test of Catherine's reform promises. Liberal European observers watch carefully. Conservative Russian nobles prepare resistance. The Orthodox Church finds itself defending a woman whose actions violate every Christian principle they claim to represent. Darya herself remains defiant throughout the investigation. She denies all charges, claims innocence, portrays herself as a victim of ambitious prosecutors and lying serfs. Her defense strategy relies on social prejudice. Surely an empress won't believe peasant testimony over noble denial. But Catherine has made her decision. This case will proceed to trial. The evidence will be presented publicly. The verdict will demonstrate that Russian law applies equally to all citizens, regardless of birth, wealth, or social status. The announcement sends shockwaves through the aristocracy. For the first time in Russian history, a noblewoman will stand trial for murdering serfs. The old order is cracking. The new order demands accountability. But Catherine faces a dilemma. Capital punishment has been abolished under her reign, a progressive reform she won't reverse. How do you punish someone whose crimes deserve death when death isn't an option? The solution will be more creative than execution, more humiliating than hanging, more terrifying than any torture Darya herself devised. Because sometimes, living with consequences is worse than dying to escape them. Moscow, September 1768. Red Square fills with an unprecedented crowd. Nobles in carriages, merchants closing shops, peasants traveling from distant villages. Everyone comes to witness something that has never happened before: a Russian countess facing public judgment for murdering serfs. The trial itself was conducted in private, but its conclusions will be announced publicly. Catherine the Great has crafted a punishment designed to send multiple messages simultaneously, to the nobility, to the serfs, to European observers, and to history itself. Darya Saltykova stands in the square, wearing a simple brown dress, no jewelry, no noble insignia, no symbols of rank or privilege. Around her neck hangs a placard reading, "This woman has tortured and murdered." The words are written in Russian and Church Slavonic, ensuring maximum comprehension among the crowd. The public shaming, known as civic execution, represents Catherine's compromise between justice and reform. Capital punishment has been abolished, but social death remains possible. Darya will be stripped of all titles, all property, all legal rights. She will cease to exist as a noblewoman and be reborn as a prisoner. But the real punishment lies in what happens next. The crowd's reaction reveals Russia's complex relationship with justice. Some cheer. These are mostly serfs, who see vindication for centuries of abuse. Others remain silent. These are nobles who recognize their own vulnerability in Darya's downfall. A few actually weep. These are conservative aristocrats who view the proceedings as civilizational collapse. Children point and stare. Many have never seen a noble woman without powder, jewels, and elaborate dress. Stripped of aristocratic performance, Darya looks disturbingly ordinary. The monster reveals itself as human, which somehow makes the crimes more terrifying, not less. After public humiliation comes private torture, solitary confinement in Ivan Foksky convent's underground cells. Catherine specifically orders conditions designed to mirror Darya's treatment of victims. The cell measures 6 feet by 8 feet. Light enters only during feeding times. Silence is enforced absolutely. No books, no visitors, no human contact beyond daily bread delivery. But the psychological torment goes deeper. Darya's cell sits directly beneath the convent chapel, where nuns sing prayers throughout the day and night. The woman who used religious devotion to mask murder now drowns in enforced piety. Hymns become torture, prayer becomes punishment. Months turn to years, years turn to decades. Darya's appearance transforms completely. Hair turns white, then falls out entirely. Teeth rot from malnutrition, muscles atrophy from lack of movement. But the physical decay pales beside psychological disintegration. Guards report increasing episodes of violent screaming, hours-long sessions where she shrieks at invisible tormentors, reliving murders from both perspectives, killer and victim. She begins conversations with dead serfs, sometimes apologizing, sometimes justifying, sometimes pleading for forgiveness that will never come. The convent's nuns, initially sympathetic to a fellow woman, gradually request transfers. They report disturbing sounds, scratching at stone walls, rhythmic banging, inhuman wailing that continues through liturgical services. Some whisper about supernatural phenomena, cold spots, strange odors, shadows that move independently. By 1780, Darya has become a legend of sorts. Visitors to Moscow request tours past Ivanovsky convent, hoping to glimpse the demon of Moscow's prison. Writers compose poems about her downfall. Playwrights draft tragedies exploring themes of power and corruption. The case enters Russian folklore as a cautionary tale about unchecked authority. But Catherine's real victory lies in precedent. The Saltykova case establishes several revolutionary principles. Noble birth doesn't guarantee legal immunity. Serf testimony can be accepted in court. Imperial justice supersedes local corruption. Aristocratic privilege has limits. Other landowners take notice. Reports of serf abuse decline dramatically, not from moral awakening but from fear of prosecution. The case creates a chilling effect that protects countless peasant lives through deterrence rather than enforcement. However, the systemic problems remain unchanged. Serfdom continues. Legal inequality persists. Most noble abusers still escape consequences. Darya's prosecution represents an exception, not a new rule. Her downfall stems from extraordinary circumstances, unprecedented brutality, persistent accusers, perfect political timing, and imperial attention. In 1801, after 33 years of imprisonment, Darya Saltykova dies alone in her cell. Guards find her body curled in a corner, fingers bloody from clawing at stone walls. Her final words, according to convent records, were not confession or repentance, but a question repeated endlessly. Why won't they stop screaming? Her death receives no official acknowledgement, no funeral, no burial marker, no religious service. The body disappears into an unmarked grave, joining hundreds of anonymous dead in Moscow's Potter's Field. The irony is perfect. The woman who created so many unmarked graves becomes one herself. Darya Saltykova died forgotten, but the world that created her survived for another 60 years. Serfdom wasn't abolished until 1861. Legal equality came even later. The aristocratic immunity that protected Darya protected thousands of others who simply avoided her mistakes, being too obvious, too brutal, too careless about witnesses. Her case represents a terrifying truth about power structures. She wasn't uniquely evil, she was uniquely caught. How many other estates concealed similar horrors? How many other nobles treated human beings as disposable entertainment? The records suggest at least 138 confirmed deaths, but investigators suspected far more. Bodies buried hastily in winter, victims who disappeared during travel between estates, suspicious accidents that were never investigated. The true number may be twice as high, or higher still, but Darya's legacy extends beyond body counts. She proved that absolute power doesn't corrupt gradually, it reveals instantly. Given unlimited authority over other human beings, she immediately began exercising it for personal pleasure. The capability for systematic cruelty existed within her before the opportunity arose. The most disturbing aspect isn't her individual pathology, but social complicity. Hundreds of people knew what was happening. servants, officials, priests, neighbors, fellow nobles, yet the system protected her for years, not through ignorance, but through indifference. Evil doesn't require monsters. It requires ordinary people choosing comfort over courage. Countess Saltykova is gone. But the systems that enable powerful people to brutalize vulnerable ones, those adapt, evolve, and endure. They're still whispering in palaces today. If you think monsters wear masks, think again. Sometimes they wear crowns, speak to priests, and sleep in silk sheets. The darkness isn't coming. It's already here. It just learned to smile.